Hi everyone, welcome back. This is KrazyBatLady. Today I want to show you how to play Hu Tao. She's one of my very favorite characters in Genshin Impact, but she is a little bit complicated. So slight disclaimer, this might be a bit of a long video as there's a ton of stuff to go over, including her build, synergy, how she plays, and a lot of stuff. So let's get right into it and go to her most important part, her talents, and how to use them properly. Now, Hu Tao's basic attack and her elemental skill work in tandem with each other. I'll explain in a second. As you can see, the modifiers are pretty average, except for her charge attack. Her charge attack has a very large modifier, and you're going to want to constantly be spamming her charge attack. And not only because it has a large modifier, but it will also leave a blood blossom on enemies, which is very important. Now, when you use her elemental skill, it will infuse your attacks with pyro damage based on Hu Tao's max HP. Now, she has a very low base attack, but this way than more makes up for it. Trust me. She gets insanely strong. So you want to use like an HP Sans. And when you use this, it makes your basic attacks pyro. And you just deal a whole crap load of damage this way. It drains 30% of your current HP. You cannot kill yourself this way. And the more you level it up, the more of your HP gets converted into attack. And also raises your blood blossom damage. Now, there's Spirit Soother, her ultimate move, which is basically a big nuke. Now, you can use Spirit Soother to get some of your health back, but do be careful, as if you hit a lot of enemies, you can get almost all of your health back, and you actually want to be below 50% health with Hu Tao. And one reason right here is this skill in particular. You get a much higher damage if you're below 50% HP. Now, her passive skills. This one is kind of weird. If you want to run a support Hu Tao, you can. But if you use her elemental skill and swap out, or her skill and her burst and swap out, your other party members will gain 12% crit. Now, the second reason you want Hu Tao to be at less than 50% health is because you'll get a 33% pyro damage. And this is actually very, very important and massive, because you're going to be dealing so much more damage. As mentioned here, it'll also affect your burst, and you use your skill and your burst together. The last one is you have a chance to make a suspicious dish when cooking. I recommend Adventure's dish. Here's the sus dish. And here's the delicious dish next to each other. You can tell which one's which. Now, your Hu Tao rotation is going to look a bit like this. You cast your shield, and then use your elemental support, such as Xingqiu or Rosaria. And then you switch back to Hu Tao, use her elemental skill, and go to town with her charge attacks. And then at the end of your rotation, you use your burst before your elemental skill runs out to do a bit of damage. And Hu Tao is all about the elemental reactions, because you just get so much out of Hu Tao with her elemental reactions. You can see there, she's dealing really nice amounts of damage with the Vaporize, and also the Blood Blossom too, not to mention. Make sure, if you're going to cast her burst, make sure that her elemental skill is on and activated, or else your damage is going to be significantly low, because you won't get that giant bump in damage. And that damage looks like this compared to each other. So, as you can see, a pretty big difference in her attack. And also make sure that her HP is below 50% too, so that you get that huge pyro damage bonus, and also the bigger modifier on her elemental burst. And if you're using Homa, that's an even bigger burst, because Homa has a passive that synergizes with Hu Tao's kit amazingly well. And there's another way you can play Hu Tao in a nuke team, but I don't find this practical for everyday gameplay. Like, this is good for bosses and stuff, but this isn't going to be like an ideal team for Spiral Abyss or anything. You can hit much bigger numbers than me. That's just a demonstration. Now moving on to her Blood Blossom. Her Blood Blossom can be a little confusing. Now, if you hit an enemy with your normal attacks, nothing happens. But when you dash through them, they create a Blood Blossom and take ticks of damage, which can be pretty high, as you saw at 15,000 there. And you can hit a lot of enemies at once, too, with this. Not only that, but they can actually proc elemental reactions as well, as the enemy will keep the pyro on them and keep ticking damage. So you want to constantly apply this. As you can see here with the Sisson Mage, she's going to make herself overload several times and kill her own shield, which is actually pretty hilarious. So you can use that to your advantage depending on the enemies, such as cryo slimes. They will melt themselves and just take huge amounts of damage. So make sure to use your charge attack and get your Blood Blossom. The next thing I want to go over are some basic gameplay tips to help you be the best Hu Tao player you can be. Now, this might sound pretty obvious, but to gauge whether her health is under 50% or not, rather than looking at numbers, just look at the little dash in the middle of your health bar. This has served me well since I started playing with Hu Tao. The next is when you cast her elemental skill, you can look at the side of the screen, and when it reaches 7 seconds, that's when it ends. So make sure to keep an eye on that and cast your elemental burst before it reaches 7. The next is animation canceling. Now, her charge attacks consume a lot of stamina and can also send you flying and overall not helping you deal a lot of damage. But the way to remedy this is by jump canceling. As soon as you cast your charge attack, you jump. As you can see, like right when it pokes out in the front, you jump and you can get a lot more damage this way. This is the ideal way to play. There's also sprint canceling. This is mostly for Constellation 1 players, but it's worth mentioning because you can attack even faster this way, which is pretty insane. So make sure to practice your animation canceling, as it's super important. Next thing is, if you really want to run Bennett with Hu Tao, you can. But it's a little tricky, as you have to have Hu Tao constantly at low health before you cast Bennett's Circle, as it'll heal very fast. You can remedy this a little bit by putting a very low level HP artifact and trying to have no substats, or completely removing your flower if that's what you prefer. But this is more based around quick swap teams. And support Hu Tao, as I mentioned earlier, this could work with, although not worth it in my opinion. Now moving on to the best teams and synergy with Hu Tao. Now with Hu Tao, you are always going to want a shielder. This is a team that I've been running a lot lately that I find pretty fun, because I can swirl the pyro from Toma's shield cast Xingqiu's ult, and then do a ton of vape damage. And also, this gives you Pyro Resonance, which gives you 25% attack increase, which is nice. Even for Hu Tao with a low attack skilling, it's great. And you can also run Xinyan. You just want some form of protection. Zhongli will do just fine. Zhongli's amazing with Hu Tao. Diona. You can also run Noelle, and Noelle has her life insurance thing where you get to low health that she gives you an automatic shield, and that's really handy. So just make sure to run a shield of some sort. Now the next team I want to talk about is the Melt team. If you have Ganyu and you run her with energy recharge, you can have her ultimate up all the time, and that's just constant cryo damage so you can melt more. And especially if you have another cryo team member like Diona or Rosaria on the team, because then you're going to get the cryo resonance, which gives you a 15% increase in crit rate to enemies affected by cryo. And with this team, I'm also getting the resonance for Pyro. So this is a very nice team. Alternatively, you can use Kaya, as Kaya works very well for melting, but not so much Changyang. His elemental skill does apply to polearms, but not in Hu Tao's case, because her Pyro cannot be overwritten and you wouldn't want to. So this would be a waste of Changyang. The next team is the Geo Resonance team. Now, the great thing about having Geo members in your Hu Tao team is that they won't affect your elemental reactions with Xingqiu or whatever other elemental reactions you want to deal. And you also get the Geo Resonance, which is really nice and has some resistance shred and extra damage. Now, the Nuke Tao team, I don't find to be very practical in most gameplay situations, but it can be fun to go and just see how high of numbers you can get against bosses and such. And then, of course, there's the All Pyro team, where you swirl Pyro and just try to deal as much fire damage as you can. That's totally viable too in a lot of situations. Now we're going to move on to her weapons. Her best weapon, of course, being the Staff of Homa, as it has crit damage, an HP bonus, and also a passive that gives you more damage at being at low health, which synergizes with Hu Tao's kit very well. The next I would suggest, because of the crit rate, is going to be the Deathmatch, which is a Battle Pass weapon. The passive isn't great for Hu Tao, but at high refinements it can pay off. The Black Cliff Pole is definitely a good bet, as you can buy it with Star Glitter in the Star Glitter shop, and it gives you a hefty amount of crit damage. The next choice would be Dragon's Bane, especially at high refinements. This thing can be amazing on Hu Tao, but you have to have really good artifacts with a lot of crit and crit damage. As for the craftable polearms, I can't recommend any of them. Prototype Star Glitter would probably be the best, but even that isn't really something that's going to be a lot great for Hu Tao. You are better off actually using the White Tassel, a 3-star weapon, as it has a crit rate, and the low base attack isn't going to hurt you as much as you would think. It's actually a pretty solid weapon. The passive doesn't do much for you, as you're going to be wanting to do in charge attacks, though. As for the other 5 stars, the Primordial Jadewing Spear is amazing because it has a crit rate, the passive's alright, and would recommend. The Skyward Spine is it's kind of meh. It's got energy recharge and an okay passive, and Vortex Vanquisher and Engulfing Lightning are just no. Unless you have like Refinement 5 or something of Vanquisher, then I wouldn't recommend either of these, as energy recharge isn't really a great stat in Hu Tao. And neither is attack percentage for the most part. And now moving on to the arguably most important part of building any character in Genshin Impact, the artifacts. The best set, hands down, is a 4-piece Crimson Witch of Flames. It's very good and gives you lots of pyro damage. Now, for the sands, use an HP sands above attack sands, because this will generally end up being better, because of her HP scaling. But if you have an attack stance with insane substats, use that. Of course, pyro damage on the goblet, and crit damage or crit rate on the circlet, whichever you're lacking and you need more of. Now, some alternatives to the Crimson Witch set, you can use a 4-piece Shiminawa, as it gives you a 50% increase to your charge attacks. And that's actually pretty big, especially since you use a lot of charge attacks. Another option could be a 2-piece Wanderer and 2-piece Crimson Witch, so you get some elemental mastery to go with it. And another option could potentially be a retracing Bolide 4-piece. This one isn't going to be as effective as the last two, but it does give you a pretty sizable chunk in charge attack damage with the 4-piece. And if you have none of these, some purple artifacts, of course, are going to be Berserker, Martial Artist, or Instructors, or Wanderers. That gives you the Elemental Mastery. Now for the substats, you want HP percentage, as much crit rate and crit damage as you can possibly get, and Elemental Mastery because Hu Tao does a lot of elemental reactions, ideally. And as said before, her best set is going to be Crimson Witch, followed by Shiminawa. And now I'm going to go over Hu Tao's Constellations. Her Constellation 1 being a really nice one to have, as it gets rid of her stamina problems for her charge attacks. And her Constellation 2 increases Blood Blossom damage, and Spirit Soother will also apply the Blood Blossom. So this one can be nice as well. And then of course her 3 just increases Guide to Afterlife. Constellation 4 is more of a support constellation, as it gives crit rate to your other party members, similar to how our elemental skill works. So you could actually be giving 24% crit rate to your other party members. And the 5, of course, just increases her ult level. And her Constellation 6 is really crazy. When her HP drops below 25% or she dies, she will be resurrected and become incredibly tanky and have 100% crit rate, and this can happen every 60 seconds. And I've seen what this can do, and you can build Hu Tao with absolutely no crit rate whatsoever and just do an insane amount of damage by doing this, therefore making her pretty much immortal. Alright, now I hope this helped you understand how to play Hu Tao a little better. It can be really tricky to get used to her animation canceling and having to be at low health at all times. And also making sure that you have a shielder with her so that she doesn't die. But she's so worth it. She's an amazing character. She's one of the best DPS characters in the game and highly worth the investment. And just so many awesome mechanics about her. She's just one of my favorites. So anyways, I hope you found this helpful. Please leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more guides, Genshin Impact content. And that's all. Have a nice day. Bye.